Welcome to the Happiness Podcast. I'm Dr. Robert Puff. Do you know what one of the number one things that is going to cause you distress in life, get you upset, even mad, are rules? But why would rules make me upset? After all, most of us like rules. We like it, that there's things in place that create harmony in our world, that make things go smoothly. There's a popular movie series, I don't know if you've seen it, called The Purge. It's based on the premise where a day's given where there are no rules. People can do whatever they want and there won't be any consequences to what they do. And you're probably not surprised that the movie is categorized as a horror movie because what this is horrible. We would hate it if there was a day without any rules. I mean, could you imagine a day where there weren't any rules for the way people drive? I mean, there'd be so many accidents and incidences, it would just be awful. Rules are good. But there's one way that rules get us in trouble, which is what I want us to focus on today. And that's that not everyone lives by the same rules. Now, what I just said may seem obvious, but I actually think we forget about it periodically. And when we do, and we confront someone that is living by different rules than we are, then our state of happiness, joy, and peace can go out the window because all of a sudden there's a conflict and we often engage with that conflict. I remember the first time this really stood out in my life. I was traveling for a couple months through India, and in India there's a custom, there's a rule that when you say no, you shake your head a certain way, and when you say yes, you shake it the same way, but at a different speed. So for me, when they were saying yes, I thought they were saying no, but they were saying yes. And I remember a few times getting pretty upset because I thought they were saying no when they were actually saying yes. Thankfully, I did learn about this custom, this rule that was different than mine. But what I realized through traveling, that people see the world very differently. But normally we're not living in a different culture where there are blatant different customs and rules about how life is to be lived. And so we think that everyone around us should see the world like we do and experience the world like we do. And that's where the conflict can arise. Here's a very common example. Let's say someone has lived with their family their entire lives. They know the rules by which the family does things. Like when you grab something to eat, you clean up after yourself. It's a simple rule. Everyone does it. It's well entrenched, and that's what you do. Well, they go off and get their first apartment, and they have roommates. Well, their roommates had perhaps different rules growing up. They may have sat down wherever they were, eaten their food, and just left it there because they know their mom would come by, pick up their dishes, wash them for them, and they would never have to wash a dish their entire life. Now they have a roommate who's irritated with them because they're asking them to wash their dishes. They've never washed dishes before. That's not the rules they live by. In the past, someone else washed their dishes. They've never washed their dishes, so why would they start doing it now? I mean, if they leave them, won't you be washing my dishes? That's what I'm used to. What are you used to? And then conflict arises because you're mad at them because they're leaving their dishes out, and they're mad at you for getting mad at them for leaving their dishes out. That's just the way the rules they grew up with. What's the problem? The problem arises when we don't realize or don't acknowledge that people live by different rules. And if we expect them to live by our rules, there's going to be conflict. But if we can begin to understand that, it's not necessarily that they're being a jerk. It's just they grew up with different rules. Their culture was very different than mine. And because of that, they live differently and they interact differently. It's not that they're being a jerk, like I'm saying in my head. It's not that it even needs to be a conflict. I just need to understand in this situation, this is how they behave. And I have to ask myself, how am I going to respond to that? Because typically what we do is we react. We get mad. We get upset. We may not say anything, but then we're stewing for an hour or two, perhaps even a day, thinking, wow, what's wrong with them? And we just get upset. We get angry, and it takes away from our happiness. And if we're listening to this talk, we want to be happy. So we have to start with the understanding that, yes, we all live by rules, but they can be very different rules. I remember years ago having a friend that helped me with this. She helped me in the way that she explained that her rules were different than my rules. and her rules worked for her. For example, the biggest way we were different is in that I tend to be a very prompt person. I'm on time, and if I'm going to meet with you, I'm going to be there when I say I'm going to be there. And if I go to a movie, I'm going to be there early to make sure I get a good seat. And if I'm flying somewhere, I'm going to get to the airport early to make sure I get to my plane and don't miss my flight. And she was very much the opposite of me. She would show up to meetings almost always late. If she went to the airport or to a movie, she would often cut it very close, and every once in a while, she would even miss her flight or miss part of the movie. And I asked her about this. Doesn't that bother you or make you upset? She said, no, I don't want to be stressed. I'll get there when I get there. And the worst case scenario is I'll just get another flight. And she was correct. So she saw my approach as being a bit stressful because I had to be there on time, where hers was more relaxed. And she didn't worry about things, and she just adjusted to the changes as it came. For me, being late would be stressful, so I was more relaxed being on time. We just saw it differently because we had different rules that we lived by. One wasn't necessarily right or wrong, they were just rules that we each lived by. So when it comes to rules, we all have rules that we live by. All of us do. The problem happens is that when we interact with other people, and their rules are different than our rules. And these little interactions happen all day long in our lives. We, in a sense, bump into people that have different rules than we do, and it bothers us. We get upset, or we can get upset. And we're here to learn not to be upset. So we have to start with acknowledging that other people live by rules, and those rules may not coincide with our rules. And what we tend to do is assume that everyone is living by our rules. And they're not. They may be breaking our rules, but it's not that they're breaking our rules. It's more they're just living by a different set of rules. I remember years ago a friend of mine visiting from Iowa. That's where I grew up. And in Iowa, there aren't a lot of cars, and people tend to drive fairly politely. Well, she came to California. She was driving a car, and she was making a left turn at a signal. Well, the cars kept coming, and the light turned red, and she didn't go. And then another light came, and again the cars kept coming, and she didn't go. Well, the person behind her got incredibly enraged, started honking and screaming at her, and said, "You need to go!" and just screaming at her and screaming at her. And finally she went because she realized she can't just be polite and wait until there's a clear opening. She just had to go and gun it at the last minute, which people tend to do here in California because there are so many cars. But in her mind, she was being polite, she was being kind, she was just being respectful and safe. But the people behind her did not see it that way, and they got enraged at her. It was so upsetting to her that she had to pull over, and she started crying for a while because she just didn't understand why those people behind her were getting so upset. Sometimes how we rationalize our rules is that we realize a lot of people tend to follow our rules. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. And those deviant ones that don't follow our rules, we feel justified in getting angry at them. But they're just living by a different set of rules. And that anger and that upset, even if we don't express it towards them, is going to cause us distress. I want to talk about instead how we can navigate life's course with people living by different rules and still find peace and equanimity in our hearts. Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to acknowledge, yes, people live by different rules. Not everyone. There's a lot of people that live by our rules, but there's people that live by different rules. It's not that they're being intentionally evil or trying to hurt us. They just live by different rules. The way I see this so often working with couples is where one of the couples tend to be very calm and hates fighting because that's the rules they live by. But the other person loves passion and feels that passionately expressing both their anger and their joys is a better way to live. And because they're living by different rules and not acknowledging that they're living by different rules, they have conflict. But once I help them understand this difference, sometimes that's enough to just make their relationship go better. Because now, instead of thinking the other person's being a jerk, they realize, oh, their approach to life is different than mine. And if I can understand that, I think I can work better with them. So that's the first thing we can do. Just understanding that we live by different rules can be so helpful. So then instead of interpreting the other person's behavior as bad, or something they're doing just to be a jerk, we can just understand they're living by different rules. And that's okay. I can adjust to that, and it doesn't bother me anymore because I realize they're not being a jerk. They're just seeing the world differently than me, and I love them for all their other qualities. The next thing we can do is say, these rules that we live by that are different are challenging for me. So when I do run across someone that is living by different rules than I am, I'm going to stop engaging with the negative thoughts in my head. I'm just going to go forward, do what I need to do, and stop being so engaged with being upset over people breaking the rules. People are just doing what they're doing. It's different than me sometimes, but do I necessarily need to engage with it? Do I necessarily need to be upset about it? Do I necessarily need to talk to them about it? I can just do what I need to do and not worry about it. I'm getting on the freeway and someone cuts around me because they want to get there first. Okay, I could get upset, angry, or I could just let them go and continue driving. Once you start paying attention to this, you're going to find that throughout the day, there's a lot of ways in which other people can irritate us because they're breaking our rules. But we have to remember, these are our rules. They're living by a different set of rules that in their mind, they feel are correct. So, when we realize that, we can stop fighting the world. We can stop paying attention to the rules as much and just do what we need to do and not worry about what everyone else is doing. Are they following the rules? Why do we need to even ask that question? We can just say, am I getting done what I need to get done, and enjoy my time doing that? It's a lot of focusing in on the self and not worrying so much about everyone else and making sure that they're following the rules. Because if we do this, we're going to find it's exhausting and it wears us out. Far better for us just to do what we need to do, enjoy our journey through life, and not worry about what other people are doing. Now, of course, if there are obvious and overt breaches of etiquette, let's say a man gropes a woman in public, the police need to be called. Things need to happen to stop him from doing that behavior. Absolutely. But mostly, we don't need to engage with things unless it's someone we're in the world with on a regular basis, like a roommate, like a spouse, like someone we work with. In situations like these, it is slightly different because we now are engaging with them on a regular basis. And if our rules are significantly different, we need to come up with ways to either meet them in the middle or adjust so that things go well. For example, let's say our spouse doesn't mind a messy house, but we like a clean house. We like a house that's picked up. Well, we may one week do it our way, where we both, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, clean up the house, and the next week, we let the house be a little bit messier, or we'll pick a couple rooms where perhaps she can have a messy part of the house, and the other part of the house can be clean. There are ways to get along with a person who has different rules than we do and do okay. Now, sometimes we may notice that the rules are so different, the rules that we live by, that we need to perhaps end the relationship because it just causes too much conflict every time we're with them. It irritates us too much and we just can't let it go. So then we can just say, I love you very much, but our differences are too big and I just prefer to go down a different path. And so what's avoided is attacking or criticizing the other person. It's just acknowledging that they have different rules that they live by than we do. And we just prefer to find people more like us that have similar rules because it's less conflictual on a daily basis. And that's okay. But it's not judging them. It's just acknowledging that we have different rules. So to conclude, there are rules that we all live by, but we don't live by the same rules. So throughout the day, we're going to interact with people that have different rules than we do. Now we can choose to get upset. We can choose to even confront them. Or we can choose to say, they're just living by different rules, and that's okay. I live by my rules. I'm going to let them live by their rules. And when there is a conflict, do I need to challenge it? I might sometimes. Mostly, it might be better for me not to worry about it. Just focus on what I need to get done and leave it at that. If we work at understanding that we really do live by different rules, and that's okay, we won't have so many conflicts throughout our day, and instead, we'll just flow with life throughout our day, finding peace and harmony everywhere we go, because instead of fighting our world, we learn to flow with our world. Thank you for joining me on the Happiness Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, please go to happinesspodcast.org. And until next time, accept what is, love what is.